From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report in Special English. On January 1st, both houses of the United States Congress approved a plan to increase taxes for most Americans. This agreement avoided much larger tax increases that were going to take effect this year. After signing the bill, President Obama said it was important to have a balanced approach to the country's fiscal problems. In the final months of 2012, the country faced a combination of higher taxes and automatic budget cuts that were being called the fiscal cliff. The fiscal cliff was avoided, but more remains to be done. Congress has given itself more time to decide how to cut the federal budget. Increased tax revenue and budget restrictions are needed to reduce the federal deficit, which was over $1 trillion last year. The new law increases the tax rate on individuals with earnings of over $400,000 and on couples with earnings of over $450,000. All working Americans will have some kind of tax increase. This is because the share of Social Security taxes paid by employees will return to 2010 levels, an increase from last year of 2%. But the largest part of the tax increase will affect those with a lot of investment income and those with very high wages. Taxes on investment gains and dividends and payments from some kinds of securities will increase as well. Also, the top income tax rate will go to 39.5% from 35%. Overall, the effect of the law is simple. It will be the first major tax increase in 20 years. In addition, lawmakers are facing difficult budget decisions. On March 1st, big automatic budget cuts, or sequestration, is set to take place across the federal government. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. The United States is considering the future of an American law called the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA. This law allows countries in sub-Saharan Africa to export some goods and natural resources to the United States without duties. AGOA is set to end in 2015. It was signed into law in 2000 and has been extended once already. Earlier this month, American Trade Representative Michael Froman met with African ministers in Ethiopia for talks on the possible renewal of AGOA. He said the United States is interested in African trade talks with the European Union. He said American officials want to know about the results of those talks before they decide what to do about extending the law. Mr. Froman said African partner countries need to think about how they want to work with the United States on renewing it. He said the countries need to understand how the issue relates to their negotiations with the European Union. EU economic partnership agreements with African countries would be different from AGOA. Not only would African products be duty-free in Europe, European goods sent to African markets would not be subject to import taxes either. Mr. Froman said the wording of AGOA might need to be changed so the law is more like the EU partnership agreements. He said the United States is unlikely to support calls for giving African partners one-way access to the American market while limiting trade for American companies. In the end, the United States Congress will decide whether or not to approve an extension of the law and for how long. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. India is traditionally a tea-drinking country, but Indians are gaining a new taste for coffee. This has led international coffee companies to consider moving into the market. At the same time, local business people are looking for new ways to profit from the country's tea-drinking tradition. They are opening new places that offer tea. Coffee shops have spread from major cities like New Delhi and Mumbai to smaller towns. In the past 10 years, cafes have become increasingly popular. India's huge population of young people has quickly taken to the coffee culture. Indians now drink twice as much coffee as they did 10 years ago. The success of the coffee market has gained the attention of foreign companies like Starbucks. The American-based company will open its first store in India later this year. Other companies like Lavazza and Costa Coffee are already there. The head of the India Coffee Trust, Anil Kumar Bhandari, praises Starbucks' decision. He says cafes in India have become central to the lifestyle of the young middle class. He says coffee companies like Starbucks should have been here before. Almost any cafe chain which has a reasonable quality with its service, ambiance, and food, and coffee first, will succeed in this country. Look at the young population, he says. They are all taking to it like ducks to water. India has over 1 billion people. Business experts point out that half of them are under the age of 25. Yet, even with the growth in coffee drinking, Indians still drink 8 times more tea. They have been drinking tea for more than 150 years. India is also one of the world's biggest producers of tea, or chai, as people call it locally. Indians usually drink tea at home or in offices, or buy it mostly from street sellers. But some business people hope to change that. Amulik Singh Bidral is 36 years old and a graduate of Harvard University in the United States. He opened a place called Chai Point in Bangalore, the center of India's information technology industry. In less than a year, 13 more Chai Point locations have opened in the city. One tea drinker in Bangalore welcomes the new outlets. Out-of-home options like this are new, especially since coffee drinking has boomed in the last couple of years. This is a little different. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, welcome to Economics in Special English. The International Labor Organization says nearly 200 million people are without jobs around the world. And the ILO is warning of even higher unemployment this year. The United Nations agency released a report called Global Employment Trends 2013. It says the number of unemployed worldwide rose by more than 4 million last year from the year before. The report says 1/4 of this increase was in developed economies. The remaining 75% was in mainly developing economies in Asia and in African countries south of the Sahara Desert. The report also says an estimated 39 million people stopped looking for work last year. The average length of unemployment increased sharply in developed economies. 1/3 of all job seekers in wealthy countries were unemployed for a year or more. The ILO's Director General, Guy Ryder, says the world's economic recovery is not expected to be strong enough to reduce unemployment quickly. His group says the labor market is especially hard for young people. The ILO says 12.6% of people between the ages of 15 and 24 are unemployed worldwide. It says more and more young people who experience long-term unemployment stop looking for work. This prevents them from gaining needed on-the-job experience. Guy Ryder says to create jobs, all countries must provide more predictable policies. He says these include measures to raise wages and support buying. He says countries should enact reforms to strengthen their banking industries so banks can provide credit. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Prasuti. This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. The Olympic flame was lit in Greece on May 10th. The ceremony marked the beginning of a long trip through Greece and Britain, which holds the Summer Olympics this year. Greece has been at the center of a political and economic struggle that also threatens other European economies. It remains unclear if Greece will continue using the euro or if its Eurozone partners can enact reforms needed to hold the currency group together. On the day the Olympic flame was lit, Greek socialist leader Evangelos Venizelos began an attempt to form a new government. It marked the third attempt to form a government in the week after parliamentary elections. Mr. Venizelos' PASOK party finished third in the elections. First, the conservative New Democracy Party attempted to form a government and failed. Then, the leader of the leftist Syriza coalition tried and failed. He said the election results showed the Greek people had rejected deep budget cuts required by international creditors. Budget-cutting austerity measures have angered Greeks. The political situation in Greece raised the possibility of the need for an emergency coalition or even new elections. The political crisis also raised the possibility of punishment by Greece's Eurozone creditors. They could deny future payments from the financial rescue plan that they agreed to in February. The agreement is worth about $170 billion in loans and canceled debt. The rescue is the second for Greece since its debt crisis began in 2009, and bigger than the first bailout. On May 10th, Euro area governments released a $5.5 billion loan to Greece. But Greek officials were said to have been unhappy that over $1 billion was withheld. The failed efforts to form a government raised concerns that reforms can work in Greece. The country is now in its 5th year of recession. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said borrowing as a way to increase growth would be a step backward. The leader of Europe's biggest economy told her country's parliament, growth through structural reform is important and necessary. Growth through debt would throw us back to the beginning of the crisis. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Prasuti. To read, listen, and learn English with stories about economics and other topics, go to voaspecialenglish.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook at VOA Learning English. From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. More people are able to receive higher education worldwide than in the past. But the amount of higher education is causing social and economic divisions in many countries. A recent study by the Organization for Economic Development and Cooperation, or OECD, also finds that some developing countries are making progress. 5 years ago, the world financial crisis hurt many nations, but it did not slow growth in education. The OECD report notes the quality and amount of education is increasing the division between what it calls the haves and the have-nots. In some areas, rising unemployment has affected people with lower education levels more than others. They earn considerably less than those with higher degrees. There are 34 economically developed countries in the OECD. Among those countries, the unemployment rate for people with a university education is about 5%. However, the rate is almost 20% for 25 to 34-year-olds who do not have a university degree. This situation also exists in developing economies. Andreas Schleicher is the Education and Skills Director for the OECD. He says education makes more of a difference in the life chances of people than in the past. The report finds that education makes a greater difference for individuals within countries. But it also notes that education is reducing divisions between developed and developing countries. Mr. Schleicher says countries like China, Vietnam, and Brazil are making education an important goal. He says they are investing their limited resources to get good teachers and school leaders. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.